The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
So a couple of things right here at the start of the show. I want to remind all of you that the show is meant to be interactive. We want to hear from you. I think Traven may have already started showing you some of the sites that you can catch us on and watch the show for free, but also places where you can comment as well. We are live on YouTube and Facebook, and for instance, as well as other places. And you can be writing in on our homepage, which is autism-live.com. There is a chat button at the bottom of the page that if you click it, you can type in and enter, and it shows up here on the screen. And you can also watch the live show there too. So we hope that you will participate in whatever way that you like. Don't forget that if you are watching us on autism-live.com, you can subscribe and you will get a weekly, we call it the postcard, but it's not a physical thing. It's a digital viewer guide that shows you who's going to be on the show for the week. Also, we love it when you subscribe on YouTube. That makes us very happy because then you have an opportunity to see all the videos that we do. So that's a really wonderful thing. Like I said, we've got a big show for you today. I do like to remind you as often as I can remember that we have lots of experts who are on the show. I'm not one of them. I'm a very proud autism mom that had access to the right thing at the right time. And my son was fortunate that he responded well and he had great therapy from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. And so his life is rich and my life is rich. So I have a lot to pay forward. That's why I'm here. You know what I always say, si se puede, hold my hand, come on, we can do this together. We really can. We welcome all of you, whether you are the individual who's on the autism spectrum, you are so welcome here to learn and educate. So feel free to write in, but we also welcome the parents, the practitioners, the teachers, the aunts, uncles, grandparents, and everyone in the larger autism community, right? Okay, I'm hurrying a little bit because we've got such a big show. We like to start Mondays with something we fondly refer to as the jargon of the day. This is when we take on one word, one phrase, one acronym. We try to figure out what in the hey nani are those experts talking about. We give you the actual definition, and then I delight in making fun of it. Because what else really can you do most of the time? And then we give you a working definition, which hopefully will help you to gain access to the beginning of understanding the term. Because when you understand these terms, it's time and money saved. So today's jargon term, there it is, I'll be Carol Merrill for a second, preference assessment. I sort of, anytime somebody calls something an assessment, I'm like, who are we trying to impress here, right? But once you understand what an assessment is, which is like a test, right? Then preference assessment, it starts to make a little bit of sense, but it can be a little confusing. So let's take a look at our actual definition. Preference assessment, it's a procedure to determine the stimuli that a person prefers, the relative preference of those stimuli, and their presumed value as potential reinforcers. Yeah, it's like, how can we jack this up to say this in the most complicated way? Right? That's what that definition is. It's like, let's make your head hurt. Okay, so let's go on to the working definition so that we can get an idea. It's checking to see what might be most rewarding or reinforcing to someone. It's basically asking somebody, what do you want, but asking it in a lot of different ways. So, when was the last time somebody asked you what makes you happy, or what would jazz you, or what would be the thing that would make something worthwhile? You know, the truth is, if nobody's asking you, then things aren't going to be as positive as you would like because it means they're guessing. And when was the last time that you asked the people in your life, what's the thing that really excites you? What's the thing that you're most looking forward to? What's the thing you want right now? If we don't ask those questions, what we find is that we're hoping that we get it right. Every time you buy a present for someone, if you haven't asked, you're guessing, right? Or you took notes and you noted something over time. But even then, because people change their minds, right? So we don't want to guess in ABA. We're doing some pretty difficult things with people and helping them to learn. And so we want to get it right. And we want it to be meaningful to them. So on a regular basis with ABA, we want to check in and do a preference assessment. Now, you might be saying to yourself, but Shannon, my 3-year-old doesn't have verbal communication. How am I going to ask him what he wants? You can ask a nonverbal baby what they want. All you do is you line up 3 toys in front of them and you see which one they gravitate towards, right? And you don't just take it off the first one. So let's say you have baby, you set the baby on the floor and you set 3 stuffed animals on the floor and the baby crawls over to the blue bunny and picks up the blue bunny and you go, great, he likes the blue bunny. No, you got to ask a couple of times in a couple of different ways. You move the blue bunny so it's over here now. Because what you don't know is, did the baby like the blue bunny or did the baby want to go that direction, right? So now you put the blue bunny over here, and if the baby goes to the blue bunny, then it's sort of safe to assume, okay, I think they like something about the blue bunny, whether it's blue or that it's a bunny, I don't know. Or the way it smells, we don't know, but there's something about the blue bunny that they like right now, right? But it may be that they go now to the white bunny, which is over there, which means they like something about over there, or visually that's what's stimulating to them, right? But you can do this a couple of different times. You will see good therapists when they're doing ABA and when they're doing the DTT part of ABA, which is the part that we all look at and go, what are they doing and why are they doing that? It looks boring. And it can be boring if somebody's not doing it right, but they will do a preference assessment and they will change it around and they do it so quick that it's like you could miss it. Boom, 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 boom. And the child chooses something, boom, 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 boom. The child chooses it again and then we get right into the lesson. They do the lesson and then they get the thing. They get the thing. So that's what a preference assessment is, checking to see what somebody wants. Now, like I said, it looks very contrived when it's a little kid doing it that way. But later on, they just ask. So kids that have functional communication, they'll say, what do you want to work for right now? And the child will say, I want 10 minutes of iPad time. Great. Or they'll negotiate it and go, okay, how about 5? And the child will say 7. This is more life, right? So that's what a preference assessment is, and it's critical to getting the best results because none of us want to go to work for free, right? Not even a 2-year-old. We want to know that we're going to get something for it, and especially if we're doing something difficult, we want to know that it's worthwhile. There was something I wanted my son to do yesterday, and I said, what's it going to be worth to you? Like I just cut to the chase. What would make it meaningful to you? And I got to be honest, he said something and I said, I think it's going to be harder than that. I think you're going to want a bigger reward than that. Let's bump it up to this. And he went, okay. And now he was super excited to do it. So preference assessment, it's the key to all good things. And we should all be doing a preference assessment with all the people that we love on a regular basis. You got employees, you know, and you're giving them raises on a regular basis, but do you know, is the raise the thing that they want, or would they rather have time off? Right? Ask. There we go. Okay. We have a question of the day for you. Our question today, dun, 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 dun. I'm in a very strange mood this morning, forgive me. What is the thing you can't get enough of? What's the thing that you gravitate towards and that you absolutely love? Now, what did your mind immediately go towards? Did it go towards a type of food? Because that in and of itself is very interesting, right? Or did it go to an activity? You know, did it go to a television show? Because it says a lot about you, whatever you answered, right? Not a judgment, but it just says a lot about you, that that's the thing that you can't get enough of. It's so important to know what people's passions are. If you want to get somebody to do something, know what they're passionate about, and you're halfway there. So that's our question of the day. Please write in. And then we have our topic of the week. You ready for that? Da, 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 da. Topic of the week, new week. What do we got? I don't even remember. I have to wait. Oh, what's the point? Well, you know, what is the point? And you might find yourself from time to time, find yourself in a difficult situation where you're having to overcome something difficult and asking yourself, why? Why are we doing this? I think it's so important to always identify your big and little whys. The big why of why you're doing everything across a lifetime, and the little why of why you're doing things today, in this moment, and what's important to you. When I think to who I was before I had a child, my whys were vastly different than they are now. Oh my gosh. My whys couldn't be more different, right? But I think it's so important, if you're at any kind of a crossroads in your life, and for a lot of parents of people who have unique needs, that's a regular basis, right? And for those of you who are young adults, on or off the spectrum, you know, you might be in a moment of deciding anything. Do I want to do this job, or do I want to do that job? Do I want to go to this school, or do I want to go to this school? It's so important, if you know what your core values are and what's important to you and what you're trying to get to. If you know those things, then making those big decisions is automatically easier. So I ask all of you, if you have a child that's going through ABA, and if you ask yourself, what's the point? The point is to give, I feel, but you have to identify it for yourself, but the point for me is to give your child every chance at the ability to do whatever they want, right? I just want to be clear, because I know a lot of people will write and say, oh, ABA, and you want to change people who are on the autism spectrum. No, not the ABA that I see, certainly not the ABA done at CARD. It's not to change them. It's to change their ability to access other things. My son, there were things he didn't know how to do that now he knows how to do, so now he can choose better what he wants to do. That's exciting to me. That giving our kids the ability to choose is a lot of my why, a lot of my why. So anyway, for you, what's the point? What's your why? Why are you doing what you're doing? Do you know? It's a good thing to check in with yourself and ask, because it all adds up. Man, it all adds up. All right, so on the show today, as I mentioned, we have Nath Trevett, self-advocate, singer-songwriter. And then later on, we have Juergan Hahn. And Juergan, as we said before, let me get this right, he is the department head of biomedical engineering at Rensselaer Institute. We're so excited because we had to reschedule with him because I was ill last week. So anyway, we're excited about the whole thing. Stick with us. You're not going to want to miss a minute of it. We'll be back after these messages.
Hey, I'm Candace Cameron Bray.
Tom Bergeron.
You're watching Autism Live.
And you're watching Autism Live.
And you're watching Autism Live.
You're watching Autism Live.
Do you provide care services to someone with autism? Recently, more and more children are being diagnosed with the condition and getting the support they need as awareness grows. But what happens to these children as they grow up? It's estimated that over 500,000 youth with autism will turn 18 in the next decade, and they'll be faced with a very difficult reality. As children with autism grow up, their services start to disappear or become very difficult to access. Things like medical care, mental health counseling, vocational training, and more. All services that are still desperately needed. The loss of support that youth with autism face as they grow up is so severe that it's referred to in the autism community as falling off a cliff. Adults with autism need the same level of support they had as children to avoid falling off the services cliff. Introducing Skills Living, the web-based software designed specifically to help transitioning youth and adults with autism so they can avoid the cliff and instead fly to success. With Skills Living, help your learner with autism develop the skills they need in all the critical areas of adult life, including self-control, planning, and problem-solving, effective communication, performing life skill tasks for independent living, acquiring and maintaining employment or other meaningful activities, developing and maintaining social skills and relationships, accessing transportation and public services, and being safe. Skills Living includes a comprehensive assessment, a data collection mobile app, behavior intervention plan builder, and automatic progress reporting. It also provides a complete curriculum addressing 16 key areas spanning the entire range of functioning adulthood. Skills Living is easy to use and can be implemented by schools, parents, and autism service providers. Call or click today for your free demo and see how Skills Living can help your learner with autism avoid the cliff and instead reach their fullest potential. Skills Living. Wish, learn, become.
This is Logan Shepard. At first glance, he looks like a typical American teenager. He plays in a band, loves hanging out with his friends, he doesn't like doing homework, and he's not really fond of broccoli. But Logan Shepard is not your typical 14-year-old. Logan was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2. He was nonverbal, made no eye contact, and his parents were told to abandon all hope. Instead, his parents began an intensive intervention treatment. At its center was a quality ABA program known as the CARD method. This is Logan Shepard now.
All I really want to say is, I'm kind of copying Martin Luther King. I kind of have a dream that one day I can just inspire people and never give up, because that's what I want to do in life, because if I can succeed, they can succeed, and I will succeed.
To follow Logan's musical journey, visit www.facebook.com/officialdrummerrock or @drummerrock on Instagram. For more information on the CARD method, visit www.centerforautism.com or call 800-345-CARD. Rock on, Logan.
Parent to parent, you might be asking yourself sometimes, why does my child have meltdowns? Well, the difference between tantrums and meltdowns, they're a part of typical development, but meltdowns are when things get a little bit more out of control, when even the child isn't sure what's entirely wrong. Generally with a meltdown, there's an environmental component. There's something else going on outside the child that's making the tantrum worse. It's really important that we start to be detectives and take notes and look around at the environment and start to figure out what are the things that happen every time your child has a meltdown. And lastly, it's important to get help. You really can't face these kinds of things effectively completely on your own. Tantrums, they're a part of typical development, but don't accept meltdowns as something that just happens. Make sure you get help and support. You might be asking yourself if your child has autism. Welcome back to Autism Live. Our much awaited guest, Nath Trevett. Am I saying your name correct?
Nath Trevett.
Trevett, fabulous. And Nate is joining us right now. I mentioned before that he is a guitarist, a soloist, a songwriter, a music tutor, and an Asperger's Syndrome awareness lifter. I got to know what that is, because I don't know what that is. He has experience in arranging folk songs, mainly Welsh, but also in other languages, and is known for one of Wales's favorite folk dances. You're going to have to explain all of this to me. I want to know everything. And you've had many appearances on television, over there, and we're excited to have you here with us to talk about not only your work as an artist, but about your desire as a self-advocate to help to end suffering and discrimination for those who are on the spectrum. So, Nath,
Absolutely.
welcome so much for being here. Tell us, first of all, I got to know what an Asperger's Syndrome Awareness Lifter is.
Well, quite frankly, I've never even heard of that myself.
Why does it say that on your bio? It says you're...
I have no idea.
That's
might
hilarious.
Well, it might have been a typing error or something. Anything's possible.
Maybe. So that's enough.
But
all right. But you're a singer and a songwriter, and where can we go to hear your music?
SoundCloud.
Okay.
You can find it on SoundCloud, and you can find it on Spotify.
All right. And when you go there, we just put your name in?
Yes.
Okay. Nath Trevett.
That's right, Nath Trevett, yes.
Okay, Nath Trevett. And Trevett is with 2 T's at the end. Wonderful.
That's right.
So, Nath, I'm sorry, I've got it wrong.
That's fine.
But talk to us a little bit about your desire. You say that you want to train individuals and employers so that we can end suffering and discrimination. Talk to us about what your passion is.
Well, I was unemployed for 2 years, and little did I know that the Autism Directory, which is where I translate part-time for now, was my last hope. And along those lines, I was only fortunate to have been, recruited by a company that understand the symptoms, etc. But I'm still seeing a lot of suffering happening out there, and, I just want an end to it. I just want people out there who have Asperger's syndrome to feel as though they don't have to feel discriminated in society. And there is no cure for Asperger's syndrome or autism. Well, the only cure is to stop all the ignorance.
Absolutely, and I'm in 100% agreement with you, and maybe we can get to something here, because I think a lot of people like myself are well-intentioned, and I have a son that I love more than anything who is on the autism spectrum, and all I want is for a world in which he can be happy and be treated with respect, and yet there are things that I can't possibly understand. So I'm ignorant, and even though I'm trying, I'm ignorant, and I don't always know what other people need. So for people like that have a great desire to have discrimination and suffering ending, what can we do? Tell me what to do, and tell me what I need to know so that I make sure that I'm not in any way making somebody feel bad.
Of course. Well, first off, I must stress this. I can't speak for other people because everyone is different.
Yeah.
And some people have, mild Asperger's, some people have it more severely. And, there's a scale, but it can't be measured with a snap of the fingers or anything like that. You need to be able to just encourage them to express what it is that they're sensitive to, how severe their symptoms are. But, you have to have patience with them. Patience is of essence.
And I appreciate that, it isn't a one-size-fits-all, and there can't be a one-size-fits-all answer. So in terms of, for you, when do you feel discriminated against? What are things that people do that make you feel like we don't get it?
Well, I'm still seeing a lot of people with AS out there who are being discriminated and excluded in the job market. And, in this day and age, the competition out there has become much more extreme. And, employers just jump to the conclusion that those with AS, simply because they have AS, are incapable of doing the job, well, that's Tommy rot. They just have their own way of expressing themselves. And yes, they have, well, some of them, if not all of them, I would say, have a tendency to go into minor detail, and that is not a bad thing.
No. Do you feel
sometimes you need
you. Go ahead.
Yeah, sometimes you need people who are really good with minor detail for jobs that include a lot of mathematics, for instance. Or if you were to be a detective working for the police or something, you need to have great skills in focusing on minor detail.
And how about an engineer who builds a building that has to be to a certain specification for safety? My goodness, we want people who are really particular and good at fine details. There's a lot of times when it's a plus. Do you feel like that there's a little bit of a shift now in the world? There's many employers, not enough, but many employers who have made a pledge to hire individuals on the spectrum, and that there's even a couple of companies who have quotas that by the end of a certain year they have to have hired a certain number of individuals. Does that make you feel like maybe we're at a turning point?
Well, the reason I turned to the media in Wales, where I am at the moment, was because I wanted to make a difference to people's lives. And the thing is, people watch too much television or they listen to too much radio, and so I thought maybe they would bump into a channel, as they were flicking through channels, that is, in which they would feel encouraged to want to learn something. But, and I think, the awareness has increased, but it's nowhere near the peak as yet. And in this day and age, that's become much more extreme, and laws have become more tight. Plus, there's a great focus on the so-called GDPR. I don't know what that stands for exactly, but it's to do with data protection. The competition out there is much higher, as I said, and people with AS who are really sensitive or can be really sensitive can find things like that stressful, and they get anxious. I get anxious, and some of them don't really know how to deal with it, and it causes real worry for them.
Yeah.
And I've been raising awareness in the Welsh media, and I was even interviewed on ITV Wales, in which I gave my answers in Welsh and they displayed subtitles, because Welsh is my preferred language. But it's nowhere near the peak, as I said. People still need to be made a lot more aware of it, and they still need to be more understanding and accepting of such individuals. And for that matter, if it was up to me, and I would be really tempted to make a note of this out there, I would like training on AS in all companies, and I mean in Tesco or in an office of any kind, not a specialist with AS, but everywhere.
Yeah.
I would like training on AS to be a legal obligation.
Well, and I think that that's a reasonable request, I got to be honest. As pervasive as it is, and as important as it is to our job force, let's be honest, if we talk about this a lot on the show, that if we don't utilize the talents of this particular group of people, we're shortchanging ourselves massively. Plus, they have a right to work, and we as a group of people should be curious enough to want to know what we can do to make that easier. So I'm 100% with you on this. I think that it should be mandatory. I think that more companies are understanding that. And just like, I don't know how it is there, but here in the United States, there's a lot of trainings right now about being sensitive, about gender and pronouns that people want to use. If we can implement that, then we can certainly implement across all HRs in the United States, at least, how to have sensitivity for people who are neurodivergent. It's a thing that's time has well come.
Yeah, well, I mean, the awareness still needs to increase a lot more, certainly around Britain, I would say. And, I can't not feel for other people, if that makes sense. I'm too sensitive, and, I like to be able to stand up for people and help them as best as I can.
Yeah.
And I read something about Temple Grandin quite recently, and she's an extraordinary figure, and the way she was able to get through the interview in a way that even I wouldn't have thought of, that is just incredible. But all the same, I would like her to know just how I feel about this as well.
Well, Temple is a friend of mine. I will make sure to mention it to her the next time I'm speaking with her. I know that she feels very adamantly about making sure that individuals on the spectrum are given job skills and given the opportunity to work. And she feels that if we don't make sure that they have the opportunity to work, look, the first time I ever talked with her, it was right after Fukushima, and when the nuclear power plant was flooded. And one of the first things that I remember her saying was, if that nuclear power plant had been built by someone who had an autistic brain, that would never have happened. She said, I took one look at the plans and she said, I could have told you that thing was going to flood. Why would you build a nuclear power plant that close to water in that circumstance? And she was like, all you have to do is look at the plans and you could see that. And she said, if we don't start to recognize the necessity of giving these individuals work, it's going to be to the detriment of all of us. And I completely concur.
Can I just?
Yes.
Can I just say that talking of the extremes, etc., before all these cuts started to really, get going and get a lot more tense as the years went by. They promised us they'd only last 2 years, but look at us now. It's been nearly a decade, even longer. But before then, you used to have on-the-job training, but unfortunately in this day and age, in order to win a job, you have to have the experience.
Yeah.
And, I just don't think that's fair. There's too much focus on power and not enough focus on equality, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely. But I will tell you a resource for everybody who is out there and saying, I'd like to get more training. A resource that Temple Grandin shared with me years ago is Khan Academy. That you can take classes in computer science and a wide variety of other things from home for free on Khan Academy and learn so much about coding. It's amazing. So,
but if I may be completely candid,
yes.
I still think that on-the-job training would be better and especially easier for those who find that kind of training at home or whatever stressful, because bearing in mind it's not just down to sensitivities, it can also be quite time-consuming as well.
Yes, and it won't be for everyone, but I just wanted to mention that there is that resource for anybody who's interested. So so again, we can go to Spotify and listen to you. And what was the cloud? What was the other place that I'm not familiar with? Because I'm
SoundCloud.
SoundCloud, and listen.
Yes.
So it's Nath, and then last name is Trevett. We want to encourage people to listen to your music and help support you in this endeavor that you have. And I want to thank you so much for being patient with us so that we could finally get the interview up and running. Thank you.
Patience is a virtue, and I just want everyone out there to feel like an equal, because there is no such thing as normal. We are all unique. We all do things differently. We don't have to do things the same. And just because there are laws out there, it doesn't necessarily mean that the individual that set them up is in the right, because that individual is just another person like the rest of us.
And there we have it. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you.
All right, you take care.
Likewise.
All right, bye-bye.
Farewell.
Wonderful gentlemen. Now we're going to take a break and then we are going to be back with more Autism Live. Stick with us. Parent to parent, you might be asking yourself, why does my child stim? Well, first of all, let's talk about what stimming is. Stimming is a slang term for self-stimulatory behavior, which is kind of a misnomer anyway, because a lot of the times when our children engage in these kinds of behaviors, they're not to stimulate themselves. Sometimes they're to soothe themselves. So first of all, we want to get rid of the notion that it's to stimulate themselves. But they do these behaviors because there's something about it that feels good. And that's the main thing that we need to know as parents. It's not some random behavior. There's something about it that's giving the child a paycheck. And once we get an idea of what that might be, we need to find a behavior that can take that behavior's place and start to reinforce that. We want to pick something that's more socially acceptable. So if, for instance, the child is doing a lot of hand flapping because they like seeing their blurred fingers, then we can find something else for them to focus on, maybe a toy that does blurred colors, so for a period of time they'll focus on that. The main thing to remember, though, is that there is a reason for these behaviors. There's something about it that feels good to the child, and once we know that, we can begin to change it. There's a phrase that's being used in the autism community called stimming. Autism Live. We're very thrilled right now to have Dr. Juergan Hahn join us. We're also deeply appreciative because he was scheduled to be on 2 weeks ago, and we had an emergency, and he was so gracious to reschedule with us. He is the department head of biomedical engineering at Rensselaer Institute, which is a mouthful. But Dr. Hahn, thank you so much for being with us. And thank you for being patient with us and rescheduling.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you here. We're talking with you because you have been involved in some pretty impressive research. First of all, how long and have you been looking at autism in your research, and what made you want to begin looking at autism?
We've been looking specifically at autism for about the last 5 years.
Okay.
My research is really on machine learning, systems biology, big data. And I've been doing this for over 20 years, but previously it was not for autism. And one of the things that made us really shift into the autism field is that when I looked at what the work being done in this area, I found that really the type of approaches and the algorithms that we've developed was something that was not as widely done. And so I saw that there clearly is a big need, and there's also quite a bit of opportunity in order to basically shift our work into this field. And so what we've done is we still use similar algorithms and approaches that we did before, but now we're looking at autism.
Okay. And you say that you use a big data approach and that helps you to reveal patterns and correlations that otherwise might be missed, and that in fact this has helped you to look at metabolites in the blood that can accurately predict if a child has ASD. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Okay. Yeah, so what we're doing is that we look at many measurements all at the same time. Yeah, so traditionally, you measure the concentration of one metabolite, and then you see, is this within what you call normal range, or is it outside of that? And then you may go to the next one. And what we are doing is that we're saying, no, we look at the entire panel of these measurements together, because if one thing is a little higher than you expect it to be, and another thing a little lower, and the third thing is a little higher, all together, they tell us much more of a story. And what we found, if you look at some particular metabolites that we've been interested in, that really they seem to look different in the children that have an autism diagnosis than the ones that don't. Yeah, and so obviously that kind of can form a basis of a test, because it allows you to essentially classify if does this blood come from a child that has an ASD diagnosis or not, because the algorithm doesn't know if you have a diagnosis or not. It just sees the measurements.
Right.
And so that's something that we've done. We have been able to replicate the results at least to the degree possible with the data available. And actually, some other groups have picked up on that and also worked on trying to replicate that. So that it looks promising at the moment.
Now I'm gonna beg your forgiveness, but hopefully I'm not the only one. I don't know what a metabolite is. Can you help me to understand what a metabolite is?
It's a component in your blood.
Okay.
And it's a component in your blood. It's basically as your, the functioning of your body. You have components get converted to other things for when you create, be it that you create energy or you have other functions in your body that are going on. And metabolites are basically these components in the blood.
And do we have the ability to change our metabolites? Is that something that we can do? Like if I drink more water, does that change my or do I eat differently to change my metabolites, or no?
Yeah, you can change those things. And and now drinking water is probably, that's not the approach, but the diet has an effect on metabolites.
Okay.
Yeah, and so you can have diet, supplements change metabolites, certainly certain medicines can change metabolites. I mean, the key is if you want to look at interventions, pick some that are more promising than others.
And you actually, in the packet that I received, you say that you have been able, using your research, you are able to analyze whether an ASD treatment is effective. Are we only talking about biomedical treatments, or are we talking about any kind of treatment?
Well, so far we've only looked at a few specific biomedical treatments. Yeah, and basically what we have, and the way we look at this is twofold. I mean, number one, obviously the ultimate goal is you want to see that the child is doing better. Yeah, but what we've also looked at is that what's happening essentially with these metabolites in the body. Are the concentration of the metabolites, have they moved closer to what I would consider a normal range in response to treatment? You could potentially do this with other types of treatment, but it's just, it's not something we've done. I don't have any data on it.
Okay.
But there's no, I mean, it's certainly something for people to investigate in the future, but it's not something that we've done so far.
Okay, so far because my next question was going to be, so what have you found? Is something more effective than something else? But you're not at that point yet. It's just that you could potentially.
Yes, I mean, what we've looked at, for example, is that one of the treatments was, what does high dose folinic acid do? Yeah, if somebody's taken that.
Right.
We've also basically, in currently ongoing work where people did changes to the microbiome, yeah, and see does this somehow does it show up? So we've done this type of work.
And can you tell us what you found, or is that secret still?
It's not necessarily secret, but at some level, I mean, basically some treatments tend to seem to work a little better than others. None of them basically there's no cure. Okay,
there's no magic bullet.
Completely normalize it, but some of them show a bigger positive shift than others. I would say the details I would like to wait until the paper is published and has been peer reviewed.
I completely respect that. I completely respect that. Now, one of the other things you've been looking at, there's a couple of different things you've been looking at. You've been looking at when there are co-occurring conditions with children. And I'm particularly interested in, you looked at the question, do antibiotics increase gastrointestinal symptoms for children with ASD more than they would other children? So I'm interested in all of this because a lot of people in the autism community are looking at the spectrum and wanting to figure out, why do some things happen to some children and not to others, and why do some children do better than other children? So fascinating to me that you're looking at both of these things. In your literature, you kind of give us an answer about the antibiotic question. Can you share with us what you found out about antibiotics?
Sure. I mean, basically what we were interested in, we know that children with autism in general are diagnosed with more GI issues than children who are typically developing. And on average, children with autism have received more antibiotics earlier in life. And what we wanted to know is that, well, is the higher occurrence of the GI problems even later than they've been given the antibiotics? Is this due to the antibiotics, or is this due to other factors? And the factor could just be something related to them having autism. And what we found is that obviously increased use of antibiotic during the first 3 years of life did result in a slight increase in GI issues even during later years of life, like years 4 and 5. However, the big difference between the children who have autism and the ones who are typically developing is really just if you have the autism diagnosis. So we found that the increase due to antibiotics was essentially the same for the children with autism as well as the ones without. Yeah, and that's important. And so far, is that because you have to figure out if you're a doctor and if you think about prescribing antibiotics, do I have to treat the children with autism differently in this case or not? And the answer is that no. Obviously you need to be careful before prescribing antibiotics, but the effect seems to be the same. That being said, the children with autism on average had twice the number of GI issues than the ones who are typically developing. So clearly there's something in autism that's correlated with many more GI problems.
There we go. But it's not, what you found was that it wasn't being caused by being treated with antibiotics when they already have autism, which is a great thing for parents to know, because I know a lot of people that have concerns about that. So going back to the co-occurring conditions, it's one of the hot topics right now for everyone is phenotyping autism, that the autism community has come to understand, because if it's that old saying of Stephen Shore's, if you met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism, although we can see that there are sort of groups. Whenever I'm at an autism conference, you watch the moms who will ask certain questions and they're like, oh, your kid is like mine, and your kid is different than mine. And we sort of cluster together because we learn from each other. But I love that science is catching up to that. And you have done some research, and my understanding is that you've been able to see 3 distinct types. Is that correct?
Yes, basically we found, or the work that we did, it made the most sense to really split this up into 3 groups. Yeah, and the way we did this is that we looked at co-occurring conditions that children had over the first 5 years of life, and we basically looked at how many different co-occurring conditions they had. And we also basically did the same type of analysis on a large group of typically developing children. And to put this into context, we had over 280,000 children that were part that when we looked at this. So it's a very significant number. And from these 3 groups, we found that there's roughly a quarter of the children with autism that have very large number of co-occurring conditions. On average, they were more than twice as likely to have those than the typical developing group. And then we had a second group that had fewer co-occurring conditions, but they were more things like developmental delays. So there were a few specific ones that fell into it. And that was roughly another quarter. And then we had about half of the group where they had a few more co-occurring conditions than typically developing, but it was not substantially more. So we really found these 3 subgroups where, yes, some kids, they may not have a lot more co-occurring conditions than typically developing children, while others have a lot more, and sometimes more for certain specific ones.
But you also found that there was a time component, that some of these things happened together. Can you give us an example of what that is?
Okay, so this time component there was basically we're interested in figuring out is there a time when children are more likely to be diagnosed with the condition, and we want to correlate that with saying maybe this condition has first really presented itself at that time. And so, for example, when we looked at GI problems, the children with autism generally had more GI problems even before they had a diagnosis and even shortly after birth, but really after about 1 year of age, there was a divergence. The difference between the children with ASD and the ones that are typically developing became larger and larger after that time point. Yeah, and so that's something interesting for us because it tells us that obviously there must be something going on causing this divergence in the diagnosis of co-occurring conditions. And I don't have the answer for you just yet what that is, but it is certainly a starting point saying, well, that's the time point where things certainly need to be looked at more closely.
It's just fascinating to me, and I'm excited that there are people like you in the world that are looking at these kinds of things because the basis of this is going to inform a lot of things down the road. So it's like building a scaffold. What do you see? What's sort of your vision? What do you hope? I don't even know if this is an appropriate question to ask a researcher, but when all is said and done and you retire, what do you hope you found? Have you thought about that? Or are you just open to whatever it is you find?
No, I mean, luckily I have a few years until I retire.
Yes,
so
you're a young man.
There's a lot of work that can still be done between now and then. But, look, there's several things that I'm really hoping to get into with this. I mean, one thing is that I think sooner or later we're going to have some physiological test that helps with the ASD diagnosis. Now this does not replace the current diagnosis, how it's done, but I do think that we have to gain a better understanding for what's happening in the body, and there's something that we can learn from that. Then, I mean, autism is, there's a lot of heterogeneity there, and trying to find some subtypes in order to determine how to best basically deal with this. I mean, some children may better react to certain types of treatments than others. That's something that hopefully we'll get to in the long run. Ultimately, yes, hopefully there are some treatments that help. And I think that's something we want to contribute to. And now these studies on co-occurring conditions, on the one hand, I hope that we gain a bit more insight on what these co-occurring conditions are. If they happen together, then there's probably some reason that's either developmental or some pathways, biological pathways in the body. Why are these things happening together? That gives us a better insight on what to do there. Yeah. And lastly, I think we have challenges in that if your child goes to a doctor and there's certain medical decisions need to be made, then you assume that all the decisions for a child with autism would be the same as the decisions for a child without autism. And I am not necessarily convinced that that's the case in all of it. And so we have to figure out, so I get a better sense on in which cases can you really make decisions on the same basis, like we found for antibiotics, it doesn't matter there. But there may be other things where you could decide that, well, maybe you need to treat this differently. Like, for example, when do you decide that you need to screen for epilepsy? Is that something that you would do for the same reason or at the same point in time for a child with autism as for one that doesn't have autism but that has other concerns? And I hope that we'll get to a point where we learn more about those things.
Well, I find it really exciting, and I think part of what's exciting for me is that as a mom, and as I've met many other moms over the last 10 years covering autism, you see that, well, for instance, I mean, I'm a big believer in ABA, and I've seen kids make tremendous progress. but I've seen families that didn't make the tremendous progress, and often, if not always, it's because there are co-occurring issues. And if there was a way that we could get to the bottom of that and figure out how to help that population, then it would be huge. It would be very huge. There's so many families out there that are wanting answers to questions and wanting help and support. And as you unlock the keys to that, I think that that could be a really powerful, powerful thing for our community. So I just want to thank you on behalf of all of us for doing this research and being so passionate about it, because it's people like you that really move the dial on this topic. So I congratulate you on everything that you found, and I can't wait to hear the answers to some of your questions that you can't share with us yet. I'll look forward to seeing those results. So thank you, and thank everyone in Rensselaer for allowing you the time to be with us today, and we apologize for having to reschedule the other day, but thank you so much.
Well, thank you for the kind words, and thanks for having me.
If people have more questions about anything that you're doing or anything that we've talked about here, where should they go, Dr. Hahn, to find out more?
I mean, they can send an email. That's basically.
And I would assume.
I believe you have the. I believe you have the contact information.
Yeah, I don't want to give your personal email out, but I will say this. That I would encourage people to go to the biomedical engineering website at Rensselaer Institute. It's Rensselaer Institute of Technology, isn't it? Or just
Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute.
There we go. Rensselaer.
RPI.edu.
Okay, fabulous. And then you guys can be connected in that way. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
All right, bye-bye. Wonderful, wonderful. I get so excited, you guys, when we hear these different researchers. You know what I always say is that if it helps my heart to know that while we're sleeping, that there are people who are so passionately trying to figure out the answers that we all so desperately want. Doesn't it make you feel like you can rest when you know that people like Dr. Hahn are working on this? And yeah, maybe it's that the answers aren't going to come this week or this month or this year or even in this lifetime, but it doesn't mean that the answers aren't going to come. So I remember on the day that my son was diagnosed, and the doctor that diagnosed, who had no bedside manner, but she said to me when I was visibly upset, said to me, "Oh, you're so lucky. You're so lucky that he's being diagnosed today and not 50 years ago, because in the last 5 years, we learned more about autism than we did in all the other years in the last 50 years put together." And she said, "This is the time for autism." And I was like, well, you know, is there anything that's useful to me now? And she said, yes, there was. And I think that there absolutely was. And when I look at the amount of research and the things that we know about autism that we didn't know on day one when Jem was diagnosed, it's staggering. They had not identified a single gene on the day that he was diagnosed. And now it's like every day they find 23 more that are implicated in autism. So we live in very interesting times, my friends, and hopefully we're already starting to see some fruition from some of the studies. We're seeing a lot of things that are going to help right now with gastro issues, so it's very exciting. I believe that unfortunately we are out of time, that we've run out of time. But I want to thank our guests for being on today. I want to thank all of you for being here. We've got a great week lineup coming up, so I really want to thank you for being here, and we'll see you tomorrow. Until then, give your kiddos a hug from me and one for you too. Bye-bye for now.